Shalom, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today during this week of memory and of honoring Israel as we come off Yom HaShoah and we head towards Yom HaTzmaut and of course Yom HaZikaron on the way. And if you weren't with us at Yossi Klein Halevi last week, those recordings will be up in just a few days. We had a very interesting dialogues, and we have 3 different recordings of different sessions there. I also want to bring your attention to a program later this week, Teaching Heschel to the Next Generation. This is a book just published by Rabbi Rose on Heschel, on how to teach Heschel to teens. Also, next week, we will have an in-person and, of course, virtual event as well with Rabbi David Kasher, Embodied Holiness, the Role of the Body in Leviticus. So feel free to join us for that as well. Today, we're delighted to have Rabbi Yair Silverman right out of Zichron Yaakov to talk about Israel at 77. I see Lauren Blatt, who used to live in Zichron Yaakov, is very excited about that, up from Canada. Is to Israel at 77, appreciating dreams in a world of challenges. Wow. Yes. Can we handle that? Can we hold the darkness and the light at the same time? So let me tell you just briefly about Rabbi Yair Silverman, who is the co-founder and Rabbi of Moed in Zichron Yaakov, Israel. Moed brings together secular and religious Israelis in the Carmel region in Torah study and social action to reimagine and generate passionate and shared Jewish life in modern Israel. He also serves as a judge on the Rabbinic court of Giyur K'halacha for conversions. Before making aliyah in 2006, big celebration for you next year, Rabbi Yair served as the rabbi of Congregation Beth Israel in Berkeley, California. Rabbi Yair is ordained by Ritz of Yeshiva University, studied at Yeshivat Birkat Moshe, and served in a combat unit of the IDF and in the reserves. Rabbi Yair, thank you so much for being here with us, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Shmuley. It's truly an honor and exciting to be part of even virtually the Valley Beit Midrash, a place where ideas and wisdom really come and engage one another. And it's also wonderful to see so many both familiar and new faces on the Zoom. So I'm excited. And I think the suggestion from Ali was to try and make a overall presentation, and I know that my teaching style is very often to be interactive. If people have things they want to say, I opened the chat on the side. I will try and be attentive to it, and I'm excited. So let's jump in. May all our problems, both Israel and personal, be solved the same situation. So I assume, and I know that we're speaking to a diverse group and diverse opinions, and that's what I love about Judaism and about people, that you have, 2 Jews, 17 opinions, and when it comes to Israel, it's a third rail for so many, many, many caring, loving Jews. And sometimes there's a feeling that our passion crowds out the ability to hear other voices. So even though I'm going to be presenting and it's not going to be give and take, I respect the voices. I love the voices. I love what you're thinking about, and feel free to chat with me either online now or afterwards. And I really do deeply care, and don't believe there's any one answer to these big questions. Obviously, the last 569 days have been literally a meat grinder for those of us here in Israel, and certainly for Jews throughout the world. And when we come to moments of celebration and moments that take stock after October 7th, we need to ask ourselves a question of how are we going to move forward with that? And that's really kind of where I would like to take this class in some ways. I think not only Israel, but in general in life, a lot of life has to do with how we tell our story. And what story are we telling? Just for a minute, yourselves, think about your own lives, right? How do you tell your story? How's that story begin? And where does it end? We're right now in the period after Passover. Passover is the storytelling holiday in the Jewish year, right? And I didn't bring it as a sources because it's not a Passover class, but just if we remember the Passover Seder, the sages suggest we have to begin begnut and nesayem b'shevach. We have to begin in hardship and finish a story in appreciation and in gratitude. And somehow that's really almost the storyline of many Hollywood films and many of the greatest stories around matchilim begnut and mesayim b'shevach. And I want to try and find a way for us to tell our story, and I want to look at, the 77th Yom Ha'atzmaut is really the 77th anniversary of Hachrazat HaMedina, of the formal Declaration of Independence here in the state of Israel. So I want to start with the text there, and then I want to kind of contrast that to three biblical narratives that give a very, very different story to our people. And then I want to try and see if we can bring them together in some sort of synergy that leaves us both with hope and with growth and with a belief that we're on to doing something that's greater than any of ourselves. All right? So that's, I guess I overspoke my first slide, but where does the story of our nation begin, right? How do we tell our story, right? So again, I don't know if you want to try and chime in on the chat, but, offhand, I've tipped my hand. The Megillat Ha'atzmaut begins the story with, May 15th, Hey Be'iyar, 1948. But we're also part of a Jewish people. The Jewish people have multiple beginnings to their story, right? We had Passover, we had Yom HaShoah, we have also many other biblical texts that are significant, and this is just a limited overview of something that could really be a semester-long discussion. So just to give us this is the one slide that I kind of failed at. So don't read all the text. The text is overwhelming. But I wanted to give a little bit of historical background before we jumped into the text of Megillat Ha'atzmaut. On the British mandate is ending May 15th. On May 12th, the Minhelet Ha'am, the People's Administration, which is kind of the governing body of the Zionist entity pre-state, meets. And there are normally 13 members who would take part, who were elected in elections, pre-state elections, to be part of it. 3 of them aren't able to be there. They meet in Tel Aviv. Yehuda Leib Maimon and Yitzchak Greenbaum are stuck in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, and Yitzchak Meir Levine is doing critical work in the U.S., getting the support and garnering the support for Israel to go forward. But what's fascinating, it's very often forgotten, and I kind of want to give this window to our lives, that of the 10 who were there, they opened the meeting a little before 2 p.m., and it takes them till midnight to finally call a vote. And when they call a vote, the decision to go ahead with the Declaration of Independence passes by a vote of 6-4, which is kind of shocking. For those of us, I see Lauren is here. She knows our fellow Zichronites. If you look at the 4 votes against, which in some ways more interesting than the votes for the Declaration of Independence, the 4 votes against, one of them was a gentleman living in Zichron, David Remez, and he in fact is very passionate. And the U.S. had offered us to become a protectorate of the U.S. I'm Canadian, but I have great admiration greater than any person who sits in the office. America is an amazing country in my mind. Even if it threatens Canada. I know that some people are making faces at me online, but it's okay. I think America is truly one of the amazing countries in the world. And Israel, 3 years after the Shoah, 3 years after the Holocaust, had an option on the table to become a protectorate, to become another Puerto Rico as you wish, and not to declare independence, and the U.S. troops would come in and they would safeguard. And in some ways, that was a much more cautious option. Both David Remez, who is from our town here in Zichron Yaakov, and there's a neighborhood named after him, writes very powerfully against the Declaration of Independence. Likewise, Eliezer Kaplan, I don't know how closely you're following the protest movement that was very active before the war and is now kind of asserting itself. The protests take place both in Tel Aviv and in Yerushalayim on Rehov Kaplan, more often than not. Rehov Kaplan, named after Eliezer Kaplan, who becomes a minister and does many, many great things, but is opposed to the establishment of the state. Likewise, Shlomo Sharet is likewise opposed, coming from a Sephardi custom that he doesn't say it explicitly, but his disciples argue that he felt that something born in confrontation can never fulfill a dream, and we need to find a way to create consensus. Kind of, it's again, I don't know how many of you had, choose your own adventure stories as children, but the path not taken of the founding of the State of Israel is fascinating. And likewise, Pinchas Rosen, for more or less, lack of not lack, but pragmatic concerns, also felt that maybe we shouldn't go ahead with it. But there were 6 other votes who voted very strongly in favor. Chaim Weizmann, who was not part of the Minhelet Ha'am, was not part of the People's Administration, reportedly came out like, what's going on? It's so obvious. So obviously it wasn't so obvious. And I think that's just helpful when we celebrate, the outcome. Hindsight is 2020. Clearly, it was the right decision. If those of you who come to Israel, one of the really magical places in Israel is Ben Gurion's grave down in Sde Boker. It's magical because you're in the desert and you see kind of the future vision of the desert blooming. And they actually have an interactive exhibit. Since the war started, I actually went online to see if it was done. They said it's mothballed till the tourists return, which I think is a little sad because I think Israelis need it as well. But they invested in this very interactive exhibit where you have basically 8 or 9 critical choices in Ben Gurion's life, and the audience votes what to do. And they have it's an interactive video with actors. So you have someone acting as David Remez, who gets on the stage why they shouldn't declare the state of Israel, and you vote. And likewise, with issues of how to deal with the influx of immigrants. Do you put them in separate mabarot, or do you integrate them? Likewise, the Altalena, many of the critical junctures of Ben Gurion's life where you'd vote. And obviously, history made one choice, but it kind of gives you the sense of the road not taken. The same, Israel is this amazing mixture in my mind of high tech and ancient tradition. The same company that does this interactive thing. Also, if you go to Tzipori, where Rabbi Yehuda Nasi composed the Mishnah, you can also vote, as it were, on different choices of the Mishnah from Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's life. I find it fascinating. In any case, I just want to play for you just the opening lines, and I know they're in Hebrew, but I find the cadence of Ben Gurion's voice very powerful. Then we'll look at the next slide in translation, and then ask some difficult questions about these opening lines. So the whole reason I went for this slide thing is I wanted to share the audio as well. Advanced sharing options. Host only all participants. Nope. All right, guys. So Google on your own Declaration of Independence. You'll see him opening the lines of the Declaration of Independence. And the opening lines, you can hear me speaking, are that in the land of Israel, the people of Israel were established. And there we created our culture and our values and wrote the book of books. So the opening line of the Megillat Ha'atzmaut, which I thought I had a slide with it, but now I seemingly don't have it. The opening line of Megillat Ha'atzmaut, take my word for it, we're not going to hear the original slide, is in the land of Israel, the people of Israel were founded. There we created our national and cultural heritage. There we composed the Bible. All right, that's the opening line. And the great irony, Ben Gurion is obviously a biblical genius. We have copies of his Tanakh studies that he would do with people. He knew the Bible backwards and forwards. And if you actually open the Bible, what do we discover? That the people of Israel aren't founded in the land of Israel by any definition of the term. In fact, they become a people, they're individuals. Abraham comes to the land of Israel as an individual. There, he and Sarah have 2 children. We're not going to do a whole review of the book of Genesis, but Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah and Rachel, Bilhah and Zilpah have the 12 tribes. And then those tribes go down to the land of Egypt. And it is in fact in the land of Egypt, we just celebrated Passover, where we become a people. We don't actually become a people in the land of Israel, right? And perhaps the 4 most central words, at least in the rabbinic read of the book of Exodus, God appears, and in chapter 6 of Exodus, telling Moses to tell the people of Israel, L'chein emor Livnei Yisrael, Ani Hashem, I am God, and what am I going to do? V'hotzeti etchem mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim. I will bring you out under the burden, from the burden of the servitude of Egypt. V'hitzalti etchem me'avodatam. I will save you from their bondage. V'ga'alti etchem bezroa netuyah u'b'shvatim. And I will redeem you with an outstretched arms and with amazing miracles, right? The 4th one, in the beginning of verse 7, I realized somehow I didn't get bolded in the English, and that is an oversight on my part, and particularly unfortunate. V'lakachti etchem li la'am. I will make you into a people. Lakachti can be, in the English here it says, I will take you to me for a people. But lakachti, it's not like there were lots of people and I picked up the Jewish people, but lakachti really in biblical Hebrew, most of the biblical commentators understand it, I will fashion you into a people. Vayiti lachem le'Elohim, I will be your God. V'yadatem ki ani Hashem Elokechem, hamotzi etchem mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim. And you will know that I am Hashem who took you out of the land of Egypt. And then the 5th statement, Ve'eveti etchem el haaretz asher nishbati et yadi latet la'avotechem la'Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'natati etchem lechem morasha ani Hashem. And he says, I will eventually bring you, but only after Ve'eveti is the 5th. The 5th language of redemption. Most Jews throughout the world drink 4 cups of wine at the Seder night, 4 cups of wine for these 4 languages of redemption. Here in the land of Israel, I admit, even though I'm from Zichron and I like wine, 4 glasses of wine is plenty. I don't go for the 5th, but Rav Shlomo Goren, Rav Shlomo Riskin, many of the great Zionist rabbis very strongly felt that the Jerusalem Talmud suggests you have 5 cups of wine, because you came, Ve'eveti etchem el haaretz, I brought you to the land. That's the 5th and ultimate act of redemption. I want to stay on the 4th and the velakachti. I've taken you and fashioned you into a people. And in fact, what God is telling Moses to tell the people of Israel is, you're not a people yet. You're a collection of individuals. I have a vision. Before you come to the land, you're going to become a nation. You're going to become a nation through, and Rav Soloveitchik has this idea of a dual covenant, through the covenant of Egypt, from the shared fate of what it means to be oppressed, to the shared destiny, Brit Yi'ud, the covenant of Sinai, what it means to become a people who are here with a mission. And that mission, I taught this recently at a secular mechina, and they said, what about us? Aren't we part of that mission? And I believe very profoundly that the covenant of Sinai needs to be read not narrowly but broadly, that the message of the revelation of Sinai is a revelation that surpasses and transcends any one segment of Judaism's understanding of what it means to be part of that covenant. And regardless where you connect into that covenant of Sinai, I'd like to believe, and maybe I'm naive, there isn't a Jew who doesn't connect to the message of Ahavta l'recha kamocha, of love your neighbor as you love yourself, for I am God. There isn't a Jew who doesn't connect to the message of what it means. Know the nefesh ager ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Yisrael. Know what it's like to be slave because you were slaves. Those messages are part of the covenant of the Sinai. They're also ritualistic mitzvot that may or may not speak to each segment of our people. But the idea that there's something more than just a common fate, that we share a common destiny of not standing silently on our neighbor's blood, of having a sense of Ahavat Yisrael, of interconnectedness, I believe is part of that covenant of Sinai, right? And the final verses, in the Bible, we use in English the word parsha means a Torah portion, and it often means for the last several hundred years the portion that's read on that week. But early on in the Bible, they didn't have the Torah portions of each week, but they had paragraphs. So the last part of this paragraph is verse 9, and I didn't want to cut it out because I think it actually has a powerful message for us today. V'yidaber Moshe Kain el bnei Yisrael. Moses gives this message of, I will save you and I redeem you, I will take you out and I will save you, I will redeem you, I will take you on, form you into a nation, I'll bring you to the land. He says this to the Jewish people. V'lo shamu el Moshe mekotzer ruach u'ma'avodah kasha. They were not able to hear mekotzer ruach from. Again, I pulled the English just from the online, and I did highlight it, but I didn't review it. But Kotzer Ruach, I love and respect the JPS translation, and I'm sure there were great scholars, but I'm going to differ with the translation. Kotzer Ruach literally means from shortness of breath. Katsar is short, and Ruach is spirit. Shortness of spirit, or shortness of Ruach Hapenu Mashiach Hashem. One of my favorite verses from the book of Eicha is the Ruach Hapenu, the breath of our nostrils, is God's redemption in this world. Everyone take a deep breath. Ruach Hapenu Mashiach Hashem. Mekotzer Ruach. I couldn't take a deep breath. I couldn't breathe deeply. I know for myself, so often as we're going into Yom HaZikaron, there'll be moments, and there already were today. Today I was at a memorial for, not a memorial, a shiva for the grandmother of one of the six individuals who fell here from Zichron, and she just passed away 2 days ago. It was the second day of Shiva, and her daughter said, "I'm sure my mom died now because she couldn't go through another Yom HaZikaron." Sometimes there's a shortness of breath that's literally hard to breathe through. And there's avodah kasha, and there's, again, they say cruel bondage, but I think avodah kasha is really hard work. And hard work sometimes is essential. It's always essential, but sometimes it doesn't allow you to get off the dance floor and to see the big picture. And here we're told a story that the Jewish people are a collection. I'll prove it to you in the next line. A collection of individuals. In the book of Shmot, when they're given the commandment to leave Egypt, they're told, speak to all the children of Israel and tell them, and I know we have vegans among us, and I thought not to bring this, but even vegans can read about things that happened a long time ago, and it's okay, Shmuley. But the initial sacrifice in Egypt was Ser Labayit, a lamb for the household, because you were a collection of households, and then maybe you had a little bit of a community. If there's not enough people in the household, you take him with the neighboring household, and that's how you create community. The state of Israel and a people aren't a household, aren't family, and they aren't community. A lot of what I do here in Zichron is work on trying to create Jewish community in the Jewish state, because we've created an amazing state, but Ben-Gurion writes that if we're going to create a state, we need to get rid of communities. You can't be the Jews from Phoenix and the Jews from Tucson and the Jews from Minsk and the Jews from Pinsk. We got to be Israelis. We got to be everyone together. But before there was a nation state, there were individuals, and God says, I'm going to allow them to become a nation. And that's the first narrative that I wanted to look at, the biblical narrative of the Exodus, where the Jewish people, through the shared covenant of suffering of Egypt, shared that fate and say, we want to have a shared destiny. And God says, "V'lakachti otchem li la'am," I will take you to be my nation. V'yiti lechem le'elohim v'yadatem, and you know that I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. And that is in fact for the rabbinic voices where they become a people. Unlike the Declaration of Independence, which says we became a people here in Israel. I want to look at two other biblical narratives. I know there are more than two, but I want to look at two other central ones, and I picked these for particular reasons. Abraham and Sarah are often marked as the first Jews, and Abraham is called most often Avraham HaIvri, even though in the book of Genesis it only appears one time. Avraham HaIvri is the way he's called rabbinically, something called Avraham Avinu, but very often Avraham HaIvri, Avraham the Hebrew, right? And Avraham Avinu appears only once in the book of Genesis, and it's the context when Avraham comes to, he's also not from Israel, right? So when everyone says we're not native to the land, that's what our Bible also tells us. We're going to get to working it out, don't worry. But Abraham is off in Ur Kasdim, off in the beginning of the Fertile Crescent in Iraq, and God says, Lech lecha, go forth from your place to the land that I will show you. And he comes to the land of Canaan. I think it's significant, particularly if you want to be an Israel activist, to understand that in the Bible, the land that we call the land of Israel is almost never called the land of Israel. It's called the land of Israel twice. Only in the period of the Mishnah, when the majority of Jews are no longer living here, and it's already after the destruction of the first temple and the destruction of the second temple, only then do we start calling it the land of Israel. And there's something that's deliciously ironic about that. Vayavo Palit. So Abraham comes to the land of Israel, and he the first thing he does when he gets here is a famine. He immediately has to leave the land, which is also irony on ironies. And he comes back, and when he's here, he can't get along with his nephew who came with him, and they split into two different groups. These are Jews and their arguments, or Jews and their adjacent people's arguments from the very beginning. And then Lot gets into trouble. He gets taken captive, held hostage. The battle of 4 kings against 5 kings, the beginning of chapter 14 in Genesis. And then Vayavo Palit Vayagid LaAvraham HaIvri, this Palit, this refugee, comes and tells him that the information I didn't bring you is the next verse, that Lot has been taken captives by the battle of the 4 kings against the 5 kings, and Avram goes and rescues Lot, right? And again, there's a diversity of opinions in every group, and I'm sure here there is too, but I think regardless of where we are on the political spectrum, to remind ourselves that one of the first acts that Abraham does is redeems captives, is to today a message to all of us that, again, I'm not advocating one position over another, and I know that there's diversity, but there should be no diversity in feeling the pain that there's still 59 of our brothers and sisters who are held in captivity, those who are still alive. Again, we don't have the exact number, but probably in the area of 22, to come back to be part of the families, and those who are not, to be able to be brought to Kever Yisrael, to be able to be brought to a proper burial is something of great value. And the Midrash Rabbah, Breshit Rabbah is Midrash is a rabbinic commentary, Midrash Rabbah written here in the land of Israel, edited through the 5th to 6th century of the Common Era, but it plays off a phrase of what it means to be Ivri. V'gadla Avraham Ivri. He's told to Abraham the Hebrew, the Ivri, and there's a 3-way machloket. And I really wanted only the first and the third, but I brought the first and the third, but I brought the second as well. Rabbi Yehuda's position, Rabbi Omer, Kol olam kulo me'ever achad v'hu me'ever sheni. He's called Avraham ha-Ivri because the whole world is on one side and he's on the other side. And what it means to be part of the Jewish people is to be countercultural. I had a great time in Berkeley because the ultimate countercultural act is to become an Orthodox Jew. It sticks it to the man completely. But really what it means to be Jewish is kol ha'olam. The whole world is on one side and you see things a little differently. You see things that aren't quite the same, right? And then Rabbi Nehemiah says, Shehu mibnei banav shel Aver. He is a descendant of Aver. Aver is, this is kind of our interfaith plug for a moment. Shem and Aver are the two descendants of Noah who kind of represent a non-Judaic knowledge of God. In fact, Aver is one of the great figures in the Quran. If you ever do interfaith study with Muslims, so Avraham Ivri and this teaching of Rabbi Nehemiah, which is probably written, it's hard to date it. There's been some scholars who suggest written after the rise of Islam. Islam sees Aver as the initial. They see Islam as a descendant of Aver, and here you have Rabbi Nehemiah saying that Avram is the Ivri because he's also a descendant of Aver. Is that trying to reappropriate someone else's cultural heritage, or is that saying there's a broader statement? And then you have this position of Chachamim who teach the position that say shehu me'ever hanahar. He comes from the other side of the river. He comes on the other side of the Euphrates. From the other side, the river is the Ever hanahar. He comes from the other side of the river, in which basically is saying he's not initially from here. And not only that, he speaks shehu misarech l'lashon ivri. He speaks the Hebrew language. He is other. Being that other gives you that ability to create the narrative, to create the story of what it is like to be other. So I want to take, on one hand, the statement of being slaves in Egypt, on the other hand, the statement of Avraham HaIvri. And in both of those statements, I'm going to get the third one in a second. In both of those statements, this is a picture from, I was looking for people walking on a way, and this is what came up. I don't think they had snowfall in the Middle East, but it could bring a smile to your faces. It's for the Canadian side of my early childhood. But oftentimes we think a homeland is where you start off with. Both in Exodus and in Genesis, the homeland that we're creating is the destiny that we're striving towards. Not where we come from, but where do we go, right? Where do we come from? Where do we go? And I think that oftentimes we think of a homeland as where we come from, and that's certainly the way the Declaration of Independence, the Israeli Declaration of Independence, opens with a line: in the land of Israel, there the Jewish people formed their cultural and spiritual heritage. There we wrote the Bible. There. But again, the irony, if you peek into the Bible, it didn't happen. It happened there, but it happened there as a foreigner on our way there. I wanted to look at two more pieces from the Declaration of Independence, which I think will give us a little bit of insight as to what's happening. I also want to leave time for a few questions, and I see that we're already at 37. So when the framers of the Israeli Declaration of Independence are trying to explain what we're doing here, and I think that's how we're telling our story as Zionist Jews in the land of Israel. They use language that is different than the biblical language. They use language that you see a picture of John Locke. They use language that speaks in the realm of political science in the world of which they exist, right? This right is the natural right of the Jewish people. Zchut hativi shel am hayehudi, right? Liot kechol am va'am, to be like every am va'am, to be masters of their own fate, like all nations, in their own sovereign state, right? That's kind of out of John Locke's vision, and we're going to get to the exact quote, right? Betokef zchut hativi v'histori, by force or by virtue of our natural right. John Locke has the idea there's certain natural rights, right? It's the basis also for the American Declaration of Independence, right? We hold these rights to be self-evident. This is our natural right to be here, right? I'm not sure. I know what I want to, I respect the document as a document that's being stated to the broader world, right? Accordingly, we, the members of the People's Council of Representatives of the Jewish community of Eretz Yisrael and of the Zionist movement, are assembled on the day of the termination of the British mandate over Eretz Yisrael, and by virtue of our natural and historical rights and the strength of the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, hereby declare the establishment of the Jewish state in Eretz Yisrael to be known as the State of Israel, right? Anu machrizim bezot Medinat Yehudim be'Eretz Yisrael, he Medinat Yisrael, right? We're establishing it by virtue of these rights. But I think, in our own internal dialogue, we also have the biblical narrative that doesn't speak about rights, but speaks about responsibilities, right? It speaks about the fact that we're not here by virtue of that we were here and in here we created this people, but rather we were a people that had a destiny to go to this homeland because, in the religious narrative, God has a covenant, and in the national narrative, we are creating our destiny in this land. We didn't come to the land and then create the destiny. We created the destiny and then came to the land. And I think that we don't need to be embarrassed about that or ashamed of that, but rather we need to recognize that in many, many states, I full disclosure, I see Lauren's face. I grew up in Quebec, and I have some of my best friends are Quebecois, right? And Quebecois say we want to have our own state because by virtue of the natural destiny and our culture that's been formed here, that's been fashioned here, right? And we can like or dislike, in the States right now, there are two other little tiny groups that have already declared secessions, and there's more and more discussion. Maybe they're going to secede. Who's going to know what's going to happen? That's a function of the people who are there saying our natural right is to self-determination that we want to have. The Jewish people in the land of Israel is a different story. And I think we do ourselves a disservice. I respect and value the Declaration of Independence. I think it's the language that's necessary for the dialogue among other nations. But I think in our own internal story, we need to be aware of how to tell it. I want to look at one more piece from this is literally the two lines right after the State of Israel is declared. They have a few lines about the relationship to the United Nations and the people, and then it has this beautiful statement: "Medinat Yisrael tihi ptucha la'aliyat Yehudim v'kibbutz galuyot." The State of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. Right? We have the Jewish, but what it means to be Jewish, right, is that is pituach haaretz letovat kol toshavea, right? All its inhabitants. I'm not sure if I should read in Hebrew or in English, so I'm going back and forth. I'm out of practice teaching in English, right? and it will be founded al yisodot ha'cherut, hatzedek v'hashalom la'or chazon shel nevi'ei Israel. Right? For all inhabitants, it will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure the complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or gender. Is really the Hebrew is dat. I would say mean. I thought it was migdar, so maybe sex is a better translation. I would say gender today, but 1948, we do the best we can with our historical documents, right? It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscious language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, right? And you have within this statement kind of a melding of Medinat Israel Ptucha la'aliyat Yehudi v'lekibbutz galuyot, right? And at the same time, tishmor al mekomot hakadoshim shel kol hadatot v'tiyeh ne'emana לערכים של מגילת האומות המיוחדות, right? And it'll be faithful, it'll be ne'eman to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations, right? You have these two pieces coming in. There's no discrimination, and at the same time there's complete discrimination, and you have this paradox that Israel is born into. That on one hand it is a Jewish national state, on the other hand it is a Jewish democratic state that is a state for all its citizens. And I think that's precisely, from my perspective, the amazing ideal that we've been blessed to create. And I think, people often say, why did it take 2,000 years? And I certainly don't have the answer to why questions, but I'm not sure if there would have been a Jewish state in year 1000 or in year 1200 or 1400 or 1600 or even 1800, that we would have had the ability to create a state that recognizes the need to have equality and social and political rights for all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or gender. Right? I think that's something that is unique to the mid-20th century. Obviously started earlier, but even when they had great documents, it took a long time for those documents to truly live up to their ideals. Right? And that's what we have here. I want to, in the last 15 minutes, I want to just leave us with a picture that comes from a difficult point in time, but that speaks to us today in a very profound fashion. This Jeremiah is seen in the rabbinic tradition as Navi Hazam, the prophet of anger and of destruction, the prophet who loses really loses himself in that loss. And in chapter 16, he kind of takes a little break. And in chapter 15 and 16, he takes a break and says, "I'm so full of anger and zam," and this portrait of Rembrandt's take on Jeremiah. You don't see his anger fully. I looked for a kind of an angry Jeremiah, but there weren't many online, so I went with when in doubt, go with Rembrandt if you can't get the picture you want. But the idea that Jeremiah is normally this kind of this fire and brimstone, the destruction is coming, and then he takes a little break here and he says, but after that destruction, there's going to be redemption. L'chein, therefore, hinei yamim ba'im mu'um Hashem. The days are coming, and this is Jeremiah's 2,500 years ago. Lo yomru od chai Hashem asher alat b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Yisrael. People will no longer say, God lives who brought the Jewish people out of the land of Egypt, ki'im, but rather, chai Hashem asher halat b'nei Yisrael me'eretz hatzafon me'chol ha'etzot ha'nidachim. Rather, God lives who enabled the Jewish people to return to their land, from the lands of the north. Obviously, Jeremiah is speaking about Babylon and Assyria, which are to the north, but we have North America, Northern Europe, and we don't discriminate against those to the south of us also, but all the places. Asher hidichu shama v'hishavtam el admatam asher natati lavotem. They return to the land that I gave to their ancestors. Again, the English translation of avotam is his fathers, but really more correctly his ancestors, and the ability to say that I'm appreciating those miracles even with the challenges that exist. I think part of that has to do with how we tell our story, and do we tell our story in a way that enables us or that empowers us to see the goodness. And I really want to bless us that I know that we often love to be critical, and I think that 51 weeks a year to be critical. I think that on the week between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut, it's a time not to be critical, but to be appreciative of what is. And there's a version of Al Hanisim. Al Hanisim is a traditional liturgical prayer inserted both into the Amidah, into the silent meditation, as well as into Birkat Hamazon, into the grace after meals. That's inserted on the two holidays that the rabbis put into the Jewish calendar, namely Chanukah and Purim, which are not biblical, even though Purim has a book in the Bible. It's a rabbinic holiday, and I'll explain that another time if people are confused. And there's been an effort to try and create a Al Hanisim for Yom HaTzmaut, and I think that certainly after October 7th, we need to be able to have that attitude of gratitude, to appreciate it. And the opening is the classic opening about Al Hanisim, Vala Purkan, Vala Gvuot, Vala Tshuot, about the salvations, Vala Melchamot, and there are also wars, and there are also Nechamot, there's also consolation, Sasita Lavotenu, Bayamim Ahem, Bazman Hazeh. In these days, at this time, right? And that's the phrase that's used for all rabbinic holidays, both for Chanukah and for Purim, that it's Bayamim Ahem, then at this season of the year. But many of the certainly the Hasidic masters, Bayamim Ahem, they add in Avav, Ubazman Hazeh, and right now, right? Then and now. And time gets sandwiched together, right? B'yimei kibbutz galiot, in the days of the ingathering of the exiles, reshit kumatam, and the reestablishment of the nation, k'shena'amda omot arav alam Yisrael, when there was really a danger, we bear. Every soldier is precious. Every human life is precious. But we often don't recognize what the Israeli Independence War was. There were 600,000 Jews, and over 6,000 of them lost their lives in Milchemet Komamiyut, in the Israeli War of Independence. That's 1% of the population, right? So if we use current Israeli standards, as there are 10 million people in Israel today, that would be 100,000 casualties. If we look at U.S. standards, there are 350 million, whatever, so it's 35 million. It's mind-boggling, 1% of a population. And we were fortunate. And was it all perfect? Was everything done right? I certainly believe you can be a great Zionist, and you can also be critical. But you can also have, during this week, the ability to appreciate. They came to destroy and to kill, and we were able to be victorious with great difficulty, right? Right? Ud mutzal me'esh. Many of those who came and many of those who gave their lives. I know that my great-grandfather's cousins, I don't know what that makes it to me, survives the Shoah, comes to Israel, and then is killed in a battle right by Rosh Hanikra, right in not in the summer after this, in the summer of 1948, right? And there's so many of those stories, right? The Ud Mutzal Me'esh were willing to sacrifice all, and they were there. V'ata b'rachamecha arabim, chizakta et yedei, you with great mercy strengthened the hands, and it allowed us to be victorious. V'yatzayta b'kirbam l'lachem et hamilchamtam v'natata to'evim nigafim lifnehem. And they were victorious, undoubtedly, not because they were stronger, because they were lucky, like so many of us are lucky, right? V'galta miyad chazak mehem. They were other stronger forces, and they were able to be victorious. Vaz nesu banecha v'hikimu et medinat Yisrael ba'atzecha. Vanu batim v'natu kramim. They built houses, they planted vineyards. V'gidu Toratecha. And there's more Torah today. And again, I don't want to get into who's studying, who's not studying, but Torah is a part of the rebirth of the land of Israel. V'yashvu levetach kedivrecha. And may we sit here as God promised. V'natati shalom ba'aretz, there be peace in the land and eternal life. V'kavu yom ha'atzmaut hazeh lehodot lehalel al gulat v'al tukumata, about the redemption and about the renewed hope. We have 7 minutes left. Alex, I don't know if we have an opportunity to share my audio. Do we have that technology or not so much?
I was also having trouble with the PowerPoint, but if you have a link to the clip like on YouTube, it might work.
Everyone heard a tikva on their own. This is just a version of a tikva put out by the Israeli army, and you can imagine it sounds on your own. I don't need to find it online again, but the concept is that we have hope. We have hope to move forward and to believe in something that's greater than us. And I really bless us that we have that. So now it's playing in the background only for me. I think stop my share. 1 second. So now I'm back in my Zoom with you guys. I don't know if we can have any questions or any thoughts. I'm sorry I took more time than I wanted. I'm sure I can paste in. Alex will send out the Ala Nisim to anyone who wants it. It was put together recently. Any other questions, thoughts, or feelings? All right. Okay. So
I have a question. Hi,
sure.
Hi, Yair. Is that being used, the Al-Hanisim, for Yom HaAtzmaut? For Dati Lumi people, is it regularly being used now with meals?
Well, again, it's hard to answer sociological questions.
Okay.
I think some people are, small c conservative. I know that an organization that I'm a part of printed 60,000 copies and distributed them in synagogues. Between printing them and using them, there's a gap. But I think we've done a disservice, understandably. In the face of the Enlightenment, the religious life has often become very small c conservative, and I think that part of the redemption of our people and our land is being able to live a full religious life that expresses current reality. And I think people should. I certainly do it in our community, but I can't tell you what happens in other places. It's always a difficult choice.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, so I'll just give a few thoughts just to kind of summarize it. The way we tell our story impacts on our own belief and impacts on the way we share our belief with the world. Perhaps understandably, the Megillat Ha'atzmaut is written that the Jewish people were formed in the land of Israel, and I think that that's the narrative that Ben Gurion and that generation of Zionists required for that dialogue of rights of nations, kind of in the John Locke type of vision. But I think that the Jewish narrative, but I can't imagine a state of Israel without Judaism, so we can't have the Megillat Ha'atzmaut overshadowing the biblical narratives of our creation, and we become a people either, and then there are other choices, but I want to draw our attention to three choices. We become a people in the expression of the servitude in Egypt. We leave there as individuals, as a sel, a bayit, as a households or communities. And for 2,000 years of diaspora, we were primarily households and communities, as we were when we were in Egypt. And part of the redemption of coming back to the land is having peoplehood. And I know that that's a challenge for many Jews outside of Israel. Say, well, they're doing things that I don't identify with. Guess what? I live here. I don't identify with everything they're doing. And that's what it means to be part of a people, a nation. And I even leave the Canadians out of this. To many Americans, there's some Americans who identify very strongly with what their nation is doing. Others don't. And that's why you have a nation that's greater than the sum of the parts. And that's why you also need families and communities to create strong nations. And the Jewish narrative is that we were families and communities and created a nation not by function of where we began, of where our homeland was, but where our destiny is unfolding. And it's unfolding here in the land of Israel. And I know that some of you shared with me in private chats that they're on their way to the land of Israel, and I think that's wonderful. But there's so many places to be part of the people of Israel, and part of that is recognizing that what it means to be part of that shared fate and shared destiny. It's not enough just to have a shared fate, but also a destiny of creating a place where all people are seen in Tselem Elokim, in God's image, where those rights are understood, and also where there is a national identity of Judaism is able to unfold and transpire. That's certainly what I believe. I know that we got some challenges on the private chat, and that's okay too. And I love that, and I respect that, and I think we are a richer people by having that dialogue. I think that's what Avraham Ha'ivri is. Avraham is the whole world on one side, and you come and say, I have a different vision, and that's how revolution happens. And I think Judaism is a tradition built on challenging tradition, which is, again, part of our paradox. And ultimately, I think the vision of Jeremiah writing before the destruction of the first temple, saying that someday the Jewish people will return, and that return will be more wondrous and more amazing than even the exodus from Egypt. I have no doubt if you took a Jew who left Egypt and plopped them in the middle of modern Israel, obviously the technology would be shocking, but I have no doubt that they'd find some of the things they see today even more miraculous to them than the splitting of the Red Sea or the 10 plagues. We're not here because we're better than previous generations, but we're luckier in so many ways, even with all the challenges, even with all the pain. We were fortunate to, be born at this point of time, and I believe we didn't come here to let it fall apart, but rather we came here to create an expression of our deepest, most sacred, most holy values for the Jewish people, and ultimately create a society that has the ability to be Or LaGoyim, that has the ability to be part of the family of nations in which we are both partaking, but also have our own unique voice to share in our own unique ways. So, Chag Atzmaut Sameach, may you have a meaningful and joyous ability to appreciate the good, and at the same time recognize the intense and real sacrifices of those who fell, and the over 17,000 who have been injured and require hospitalization here in Israel over this last war. May this study be for their refuah and for the protection of our soldiers, our dear soldiers, and the return of our beloved hostages speedily still today. Chag Sameach to everyone.
Chag Sameach. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us. As Rabbi Shmuley mentioned, lots coming up this week and next. You can see all of our upcoming classes on our website and register there. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.